What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants are not a good football team this season. The season is pretty much lost on them. They're 2-8. It's week 10. We're often talking about the draft. We're often talking about what this team can do in the offseason. But what can they do right now that will help them in the offseason is what we want to focus on in today's episode, because we've kind of been talking about it, Alex. We've been saying they're going to lose a lot more games this year. It's time to get some of these young guys on the field, see what you have in them, make sure that these are foundational pieces that you can build on going into next season. Can this guy steal this starting job? Can this guy prove that he can compete for that starting job next year? Who are some of these young players on this team that are proving that they have potential to be foundational pieces? That's what we want to discuss in today's episode. Dive into some of these younger guys that have a chance to carve out a role for themselves throughout the rest of this season and hopefully going into next season. Answer some big questions that we might have about them and really just prove to be talent worth evaluating across these final 8 crappy weeks of this lost season. So before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And who is one of these players that you're kind of looking at and trying to evaluate across the next few weeks of this regular season?
Well, I mean, look, guys, at this point, we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about youth. We're thinking about development. We're thinking about foundational pieces you referenced. And right off the bat, I want to throw out our young slot receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson. I really like Wan'Dale Robinson. I think that if he isn't a foundational piece, he's on the cusp of being one. When he is available, when he is healthy, when the Giants are actually throwing him the football, the kid produces. He is a very good player. He is quick. He is agile. He's a good route runner. He's got strong hands. He can break some tackles. He can make tacklers miss in the open field. He can sneak around those corners, pick up first downs. Positioning is good. He's just an all-around solid player. I think the Giants can actually continue to build around. And I would love to see them give him more targets, design some plays for him. Instead, they kind of let the quarterback, here's the problem with the Giants right now is that they can't trust their quarterback to throw the ball and go through reads. Like, they can't trust Tommy DeVito to get through 3-4 reads and actually get to the open man. You have to design some plays to get your playmakers the ball. You know what I mean? You have to be proactive in that way. And I think at times they forget that Wan'Dale Robinson exists, and he disappears for 2 quarters. And then suddenly on a drive, he'll have 4 catches for 60 yards and walk them into the red zone. And I'm like, where is that? Where did that come from? Like, why can't we do that the entire game? Why can't he be relied on? The problem with Wan'Dale is he takes a lot of really bad hits, mainly because other players do not block in front of him because he's a short yardage receiver. They get him the ball on screens and stuff. I watched Darren Waller. There was one play where Darren Waller was out there on a screen and he was meant to block somebody. He whiffed the block, and because he whiffed that block, Wan'Dale got hit in the face so hard. And, I think he went into the medical camp to test for concussion. And I'm like, he just takes these massive hits because of other people not doing their job sometimes. And I think that's unfortunate. And, that's how you get guys injured. So Wan'Dale, he takes a lot of hits because his extra effort's usually there. And he also, those crossing concepts, I mean, they're a receiver's worst nightmare. Sometimes you get absolutely nailed on him. So he doesn't ever shy away from it, though. If you ever noticed that, like Wan'Dale, some receivers will protect themselves. They'll take their eye off the ball. He always goes in there like red hot. Like, he doesn't care about getting hit. Unfortunately, it leads to injury. But I do respect that out of him, that he is not afraid to go over the middle and take, pluck those balls out of the air. So, right now I do really think that he could be a nice foundational piece for the future. I want to see the Giants keep incorporating him, getting him more involved. You keep feeding him targets because he's earned them, in my opinion. I think that he deserves to be the more of a focal point than he has been at times. So, what are your thoughts on Wan'Dale? I do think that he is a foundational piece for the future this team can certainly build around.
I agree with you, and I think that what you said there about how he kind of disappears in some games, they call plays for him specifically, and he does tremendous stuff, gets the team down the field, and then they just kind of forget about him. Right now, I think that the Giants treat Wan'Dale Robinson purely as a gadget player, but I think that he's shown enough that he can be more than just your gadget player. Like, he is a good player, and he can be a good receiver and kind of run some of these routes at these 0 to 10 yard range. Is he that deep threat? Is he that guy who attacks you at every 3 levels of the field? Probably not. I mean, he kind of showed that in that one game that he had against Detroit last year. He had a big catch down the sideline. So maybe he could do more of that stuff, but we don't know because the Giants don't really ask him to. They kind of just put him out on these bubble screens, on these drag routes, on these crossers, like you mentioned, Alex. And I think that they just need to do more with Wan'Dale. And then he can establish himself as one of these foundational playmakers in the offense and be somebody who you head into 2024 with and say, okay, we need to carve out a role for him in this offense. He needs to be one of our starting receivers. I think that there is a world that exists where Wan'Dale proves to be good enough to be penciled down as a starter going into the offseason. But the Giants need to afford him a little bit more of opportunity, right? They need to give him some chances to run some real routes and to get out there and get open and call plays for him that aren't just gadget type plays. And even if he is just your gadget player and that's how the Giants want to treat him, all right, fine. You could argue that's his role in the offense, and he is foundational in that way. Like he's going to be plugged in there for the next few years as your gadget player. And now the Giants don't have to go out there and sign a Paris Campbell who does nothing for them all regular season long next offseason. So, and for what it's worth, man, I just got to mention that Paris Campbell, I mean, what a disappointing free agency acquisition. I don't even know if it's his fault, though. Like, he hasn't looked that good when he's on the field. But again, I just don't think the Giants know how to use any of these playmakers that they have. They've had quarterback problems, injury problems. I know all that stuff, but that's just a disappointing one, a little off topic. But now I want to flip over to the defensive side of the ball, Alex. We discussed Wan'Dale. He's somebody that we believe in. But here's another player that we're pretty high on right now because he's playing some good football. Cordell Flott, been locking down the slot. No, I love to say that. It rhymes. It's fun. And he's fun to watch. We've had our question marks about him, still have our question marks about him. Can he stay healthy long term? I'm not entirely sure. He's actually on the injury report right now with a shoulder injury. So, will he be a long term player here for the Giants? Can he be that foundational guy? Like I said, I think in this episode, we're discussing some guys who have questions to answer. If they answer them, they can be foundational pieces. For Cordell Flott, I think the talent is pretty obviously there. Like, this is a guy that we want on the football field when he's healthy. But can he stay healthy? I think he needs to recover from the shoulder ailment that he has right now, get back on the field, finish the season strong and finish it healthy. No injuries. And I think he walks out of this regular season. We move into the offseason and say, Cordell Flott, we can feel comfortable with as a starter out of the slot, playing that nickel role for the Giants in 2024. How are you feeling about Cordell Flott? What have you seen from him this season? And do you think that health, I assume, you agree with me, health is obviously the main factor contributing against him and his success this season?
I mean, look, Cordell Flott has improved in multiple categories, and the primary one is tackling. He was a really bad tackler he only played 338 snaps last year, but he had 13.8% missed tackle. He missed 4 tackles, and he was not efficient in that regard. This year, he has cut that down to 9%. So, we're looking at almost 5% increase, and he's been a lot more efficient in that category. So, run defense, tackling, especially in the slot, you have to be a good tackler. He has improved drastically in that regard. And then in coverage, he's been solid. The last couple of weeks, he has been excellent. He had an 84 grade against the Jets. On 3 targets, didn't give up a reception. This year, he's given up 186 yards, only a 61.3% reception rate, which is very, very good. He has given up 2 touchdowns, interception, and 3 pass breakups. The touchdowns came against Dallas this past weekend. Still had a really good coverage grade nonetheless. And then, of course, against Buffalo a couple weeks ago, that was his worst game of the season, really struggled in that one. He missed a couple tackles. So, looking at Cordell Flott, second year, really wasn't supposed to be starting. Adoree Jackson was supposed to be that slot guy to open the year. But Cordell Flott has been moved into that position pretty quickly, and he has taken it by the horns, man. He has played well. And I think that, this is a guy that you've been excited about for a while. And you've been like, I like this player. LSU product, has had, really good size in terms of his lankiness. He has those long arms, really able to get into the throwing lanes. I do believe that, this is a guy with more experience, is going to get better. I think that he can be a very solid slot option. I am concerned about the injuries. He's been pretty healthy this season, knock on wood. Shoulder injury, we'll see how it goes. He has been playing through some ailments this year. Everyone kind of has to do that. So I do hope to see that he continues this growth, continues playing well, despite the fact that this season is obviously lost. But I am optimistic that he's going to become a good cornerback and a good young option for this team, because the secondary here is getting young, man. Deonte Banks is young. Flott is young. Hawkins is young. I wonder if the Giants go out and sign another veteran cornerback in free agency when the season comes to an end to kind of aid that. Someone cheaper than Adoree Jackson, obviously. But I do think that I agree with you on the sense that Flott is becoming a nice foundational piece. I want to see more from him, though.
I do too. I think that, yeah, it's a player who, like we said, has a couple questions to answer before the end of the season. But as the Giants get these young players on the field and evaluate them throughout the final 8 weeks of the year, Cordell Flott is one of those guys that can really earn himself a role on this team. I agree with you, though. I think that cornerback is still a position that they're going to have to address in the offseason, whether it's through the draft or whether they are signing somebody, a veteran in free agency. They definitely need to add a little bit more talent to the position. But Cordell Flott is a guy who's really ascending here, and I think could be in line for a breakout 2024 campaign if you're not considering this one his breakout right now. But staying on the defensive side of the ball, one player that I want to touch on briefly, Alex, you mentioned him before we started recording, is Micah McFadden. I personally think that he's kind of already established himself as a foundational piece for the Giants. Like, he's had such good games this season. He's only in his second year. Wink Martindale entrusts a lot into McFadden, asks him to do a lot of things, and he's a starter. He's been the starter all season long. He's going to continue to be the starter. I don't think he has so much more to prove for the rest of this year. But, how are you feeling about him, like, moving forward as this LB2? You think that in some ways maybe the season is a flash in the pan? Like, we've seen players have struggles of rookie seasons, look better year two, and it kind of falls apart year three. I don't think that's what this case is. Like, I really like the way McFadden plays, where he shoots gaps, plays in run defense, is a willing and active blitzer. I think he's a good player, and I think that he's already established himself as a foundational piece for this Giants defense. But how are you feeling? Do you think you still need to see a little bit more out of McFadden before you give him that foundational label?
Look, Micah McFadden has taken arguably the biggest jump this year of any player. Last year, he was a liability in run defense. His pass rushing, from the linebacker position was spotty. He was not good in coverage. They haven't really been using him in coverage for obvious reasons. Bobby Okereke is much better there. But his pursuit is some of the best I've seen from the linebacker position on the Giants in a long time. He shoots the gaps with his hair on fire, man. He misses tackles, yes, but mainly misses tackles because of how fast he's running. Like, he is downhills, north south, very fast. And I think he misses those tackles because sometimes the angles are we're talking like marginal angle differences here. And he misses those tackles because of that. But he is in the backfield on a lot of these moments. He's missing tackles that would be tackle for losses, not missing tackles that are 10 yards downfield. So I do think that this is a player that he's developing really nicely, and he's developed chemistry with Bobby Okereke. Those two guys, Okereke's here for another 3 years, and McFadden obviously has 2 more years on his contract. Those two are going to be very freaking good for the Giants, my friends. Like, we have, at the very least, walking away from this season, we have a nice pair of linebackers, which is something that we haven't had, unfortunately. Whereas we had strengths other places, they have now become weaknesses, and our linebacker situation has now gotten a lot better. So Micah McFadden, 100% agreed. Like, if he is not a foundational piece, he is on the cusp of being one of our better defensive players. And I think that he is only getting better, and he plays 100%, man. And like, sometimes I don't see from Giants players. They're like not giving 100% effort, and it's noticeable. Like, they're jogging, they're not running, they're not doing the basics. Micah McFadden is always at full speed, and like, that's something that you cannot teach. That is a work ethic thing. That is something that, like, you are just do because you have gratitude for where you are. You want to get better, respect to the game, respect of the coaches. I mean, that's a reason he's getting a lot of playing time, and they have committed to him because, and Wink Martindale said, Micah McFadden got a lot better this past offseason just on the film work that he was doing. So I think that I'm excited about his potential. This guy may continue to get better. We may actually see something really special develop here.
Yeah, I mean, who's to say he's already hit his ceiling? I don't think he has. I think that it's been a big step forward in year two for Micah McFadden, and who knows, maybe takes an even bigger step forward in year three under Wink Martindale, maybe, or we'll see what happens with the coordinators this offseason. But I have really high expectations for Micah, and I really like the way that he plays, and I think that he's foundational. Maybe he still needs to do a little bit more to really solidify that label, but I think that he's in store to just like continue to grow here and really become a great player for the Giants. Flipping back to the offensive side of the ball, Alex, this is one I'm not sure if you're necessarily going to agree with me, but I want to throw it out there. I think that Tommy DeVito could earn his route, or could have a route here to earn a role on this team as a foundational backup, right? Like, be that player who the Giants have this backup quarterback for years and years. Who was the guy? He was sitting behind Eli Manning forever. Nassib, I want to say his name was Nassib. They had that backup quarterback that was just always there behind Eli Manning. He didn't ever play because it was Eli Manning, and Eli Manning never got hurt. Well, he did, but he always battled through it. We know all these things. Eli Manning with his improbable start streak. But Tommy DeVito, could he be that guy now? Because you have Tyrod Taylor, who's going on to, or he will be a free agent this offseason. He's on an expiring contract, and he's always hurt. And Tommy DeVito is kind of gained a lot of fans here from Giants fans. This New Jersey kid who's really turned a lot of heads. He's made some starts. He's getting some playing time under his belt. He doesn't look like a disaster out there. I mean, maybe he did against the Jets. Okay, maybe he didn't look all that great, but he doesn't look like a disaster out there. He looks okay. Can he develop into something? Can he be a long-term backup that the Giants hold on to as a QB2? I think maybe. I think that he has an opportunity to earn that kind of long-term privilege to stick around with this Giants team. And whether he's QB2 or if he's on the practice squad and he's the QB3 that they always call up. And I know that Daniel Jones and will the Giants draft a quarterback or not, that's all part of the equation here. But there is a world where the Giants draft a quarterback and Daniel Jones is on injured reserve to start the season. So what happens then? You need a QB2. Do you get a veteran backup? Do you keep re-sign Tyrod for kind of more expensive money than you need to? Or is that where Tommy DeVito steps in and he's your backup quarterback behind that rookie quarterback until Daniel Jones comes back? I think that there's an avenue here where Tommy DeVito is on the active roster in week 1 next season, whether it be as QB2 behind Daniel Jones or behind the rookie, whatever the case might be. I think that Tommy DeVito is proving that he might have a future here with Big Blue. And I'm kind of curious to know if you see the same thing or if you're kind of like, nah, Tommy DeVito's not it. They could find a better backup elsewhere.
You want him to be backing up the Giants next year? Daniel Jones, my friends. I'm just kidding. It's totally possible, though, for what it's worth, that he ends up backing up a rookie quarterback. But when it comes to Tommy DeVito, and I tweeted this yesterday, it's a God honest truth. The best thing he's going to offer this Giants team is a top 2 pick. He is a fine young player. He is filling a gap that the Giants did not think they would ever be in. Like, I'll say this, Anthony. If Daniel Jones didn't go down and Tyrod Taylor didn't get injured, I don't think Tommy DeVito would have ever seen an NFL field. You know what I mean? I don't think he ever would have played a game in his career in the NFL. I think that 2 quarterbacks going down, a very unlikely scenario, led to them using an undrafted rookie out of Illinois. His arm talent, he can't throw the ball deep. He can move a little bit. He's very, very raw in a lot of areas. He just knew the offense, man. Like, that really is what it came down to. He just knew the offense and nobody else did. And the Giants brought in like Jacob Eason and Matt Barkley and like, God forbid, like I can't even imagine that. It's just, I don't think Tommy DeVito he's a great story. You know, love that he still gets chicken parm from his mom. Love that he still gets his bed made for him. That's great for him. I wish my mom did the same for me. However, I've since moved out. And and ultimately, the truth is that, you know, this is not a long-term player for the Giants. I don't see the upside there. If you're going to draft a quarterback, you know, you're walking away with Daniel Jones and a rookie player. Like, you have your backup in Daniel Jones, or you play Daniel Jones and you sit the rookie quarterback for a year. And, you know, there's a lot of different avenues the Giants could take with that. But there's like so many better options, you know, that are dirt cheap, that are better than Tommy DeVito and like have experience in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like, you could go right now and probably, like, how about Teddy Bridgewater or like Jacoby Brissett or like anybody else that's played like substantial reps? I'd much rather have them playing than Tommy DeVito. Like, let's be quite honest. And that's just my perspective. Like, you may see the upside there as a QB2. And like, again, like, we're not talking about a starter here. We're talking about a backup. So like, maybe he could develop into a fine backup player. But at this very juncture, I do believe that if the Giants do draft a quarterback, there's no need for Tommy DeVito to be on this team. He'll probably be like a 3rd quarterback practice squatter, if that. You know, maybe they just keep Tyrod in that case, or they just keep, maybe he goes somewhere else and they bring in somebody with experience. I don't see a future for Tommy DeVito, as grim and unfortunate as that is. I think he's a great dude. Love his story. I love watching him, you know, try to do his thing and, you know, navigate this very murky situation that he's been put in. But I do not see him as a future asset on this team, unfortunately.
I think that's fair. Listen, I think that there's a chance here he keeps playing well. Maybe he can become kind of one of those pieces that you hold on to long term. Maybe I'm a little too hopeful. Maybe he's more of a long-term practice squad piece. But I don't know. I think that there's a world where he's on the active roster at the start of next season because they've got their QB1 in the draft. Daniel Jones is still on injured reserve. Then what? Then I think you might have to go with Tommy DeVito as your backup. But you might be right that the Giants would rather opt for another veteran to get in that room and have be the backup at that point. So maybe paying up in free agency for somebody or re-signing Tyrod Taylor, whatever they decide to do. But, you know, there's not too many more players to dive into. I don't want to dive into the guys like Deonte Banks. We know that he's going to be a foundational piece. Like, that he's got that moniker. He's a first-round pick. Of course, you know, guys like Jalen Hyatt, like John Michael Schmitz. Like, we're assuming that these guys are going to be foundational. One other player, though, that I think we could touch on before we wrap is Azeez Ojulari. We kind of discussed him in a recent episode, saying that he's kind of playing with something to lose. I think that's still true. And I think that, you know, he's not going to be foundational unless he stays healthy all the way through the rest of this season and plays good football. He really at one point should have been a foundational piece for the Giants. Like, he should be a foundational piece right now. Like, Azeez Ojulari should be one of these top contributors in this defense, and he's not. So I guess I want to ask you, Alex, is it too late? Is that window of opportunity closing for him, like, too fast for him to really make it up and, like, go into next season and keep the Giants from making any big moves at pass rusher? I don't think that he prevents you from making a move, or if there's like a really talented player sitting there in round 2, I think you take them, in the draft. But do you think that this is a guy that's like going to fall into that rotational pass rusher role, or do you think that he still can be a starter on this team? I don't know. Maybe the workload's too much as a starter, and that's why he keeps getting injured. Where do you kind of sit with Azeez Ojulari and his future with the New York Giants that you see?
Yeah, the future for Azeez Ojulari is that he is no longer standing in the way of acquiring more talent, and he is no longer considered a starter because he hasn't proved that. You know what I mean? And that's the common, kind of narrative here is like, the best ability is availability type of situation, and unfortunately, he's never available. So how can you commit to a player as a starter if they're never available? It's logically, it makes no sense. So I think that you have to go out there, and with the idea of drafting a pass rusher in the second round, because you do have 2 second round picks, given you don't trade up one spot and use one of them, you do have 2 second round picks. You can get a receiver or an offensive lineman or a pass rusher. There's a lot you can do with those, or you spend money at the position. You throw some money there and try to find somebody. Maybe there's an option for a trade. Maybe you trade a second round pick for a guy on an expiring deal. I don't know. There's things that the Giants can do to resolve that spot, but there is one thing that's for sure. They cannot go into 2024 assuming that Azeez Ojulari is going to lock down the starting position. Yes, he is a rotational piece at this point. He is a third down pass rusher, raw pass rusher that's going to go in there and do what he's got to do on third downs. And if you limit his reps, he will probably stay healthier. So I think that that's ultimately use him as a specialist, third down specialist, pass rusher. I think he probably makes a little bit of a bag there doing that, but you cannot trust him. I mean, his lower body is like Swiss cheese, man. There's holes all over it. It's like, his knees and his ankles and, his calves, and it's just a disaster at this point. His hamstrings. I don't trust him. And I did before the season. I wanted to give him that chance, but he has proven to me and many others, I imagine you as well, that he cannot be relied upon. So I do believe that finding some more talent there would be ideal for the Giants to secure that position alongside Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence in the interior.
Yeah, I think that they do need to search for a new starting pass rusher opposite of Kayvon Thibodeau. But I do think that Azeez Ojulari still has a place on this team as that rotational pass rusher if he could stay healthy. Like, he can be a damn good one, for what it's worth. Like, a really good rotational pass rusher because, I mean, when he's healthy, he's proven to be a pretty good starter. He's just not staying healthy, and it's really disappointing. It bums me out because, man, I loved Ojulari coming out of the draft. I thought that he showed a lot of promise as a rookie. Thought he showed even more last season. I mean, he was injured a lot last season, but when he was on the field, he was unblockable. Like, he was dominant last year. He had 5.5 sacks in 7 games, and I think, what was it, 3 forced fumbles on those 5.5 sacks. Like, the guy was just strip sack machine for a little bit there. Just couldn't stay on the field. Same story this season. Now I think the window is closing on him a little bit too quickly, but I'd like to see what he can do over the course of these final 8 weeks. Maybe he can prove to be like a player that we want to keep around and make a component of the defense as that rotational pass rusher. But yeah, I think we're in agreement here. He's not foundational yet. Probably can't really prove himself to be foundational in these final 8 weeks, and definitely doesn't prevent the Giants from going out there and seeking more talent on the edge. But yeah, there's some talent here for this New York Giants team, young talent. They definitely need to keep putting these young guys out there, seeing what they have and evaluating who they can build around next year. This is a lost season for sure. I don't really see them turning it around. However, Tyrod Taylor comes back from injury in a few weeks. Maybe they pick up some wins. I know a lot of Giants fans are afraid of that scenario, but it'll be interesting to see how this season finishes. And I'm going to be keeping a close eye on a lot of these young players and seeing how they develop over these final 2 months of the season. But that pretty much wraps this one up. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.